Hey there, this is Benjamin Morse, comic book artist, and I'm doing a quick creator hangout tonight with Abusalih. With did I get that right? I'm sorry, I meant to ask you this before.
No worries, no worries. My last name is Abu Saleh. So Abu, think like, I don't know, the monkey in Aladdin.
Okay,
Yeah. The Abu means father, and Saleh is a name. So somewhere in our past, there was a guy who was the father of someone named Saleh, and the name kind of came from that.
okay. I meant to
Yeah.
ask you this right before we started, but we got started talking about Mistland, and it was pretty cool, so I completely forgot. But speaking of which, that's kind of what we're talking about today. So if you want to if you can give me a quick rundown of what Mistland is, and what books we can learn more about it in. There's some comics, there's some pro stuff, and it's a really cool world. So if you could kind of just give us a cool overview of what Mistland is and where we can check out the stories about it.
Sure. So, Mistland is a fictional country. Think like, say, Wakanda or Atlantis or Sokovia if you only watch the movies and stuff. So it's a fictional country on Earth, and it's like just to use the Wakanda parallel. Instead of going for, say, for example, the Afrofuturism of Wakanda, I went for something that's more, say, neo-Victorian, with the religion in particular being inspired by the phenomenon of underground Christianity in Japan in terms of the syncretism and how that can kind of like lead to a whole different religion developing in isolation. So the religion of Mistland, for example, it's a combination of a little bit of Algonquin, a little bit of the Vikings and Catholicism. So that's like yeah, so that's kind of like the religion, but then the aesthetic is more like neo-Victorian, and I tried to kind of capture that in the cover and stuff.
Yeah, I think I can scroll through. There were some pretty cool pieces that looked like covers.
Uh,
Get through here.
yeah, there was like one of those, but there was a I don't know if I uploaded the cover in that
It
section
was
I shared with you, but yeah, like that's one of the pieces of artworks in Mistland. That's one of the Mistland characters. That's the titular Sun Tiger. That's the first story in the anthology.
okay. Cool, cool.
Yeah, so she's one of my friend Kyle's characters and
Okay.
stuff. Yeah, I met Kyle in the same creative writing class I met my friend Brian, who also contributed.
Hmm.
And when I was looking to kind of beef up the content in terms of stories and page count, I kind of reached out to him and said, "Hey, man, I've talked to you about the setting I'm kind of creating. Would you be interested in kind of like making a character up and kind of like writing a story and kind of like something kind of basic and introductory, something that could like fit anywhere in the timeline until I figure out exactly where to put it." And he
Hmm.
was like, "Yeah, sure." And this is the character he came up with.
No, very cool. Very cool. It's a great
Yeah.
piece of artwork too.
Yeah, I'm
So
very happy I found this artist. Her name is Erica Perto. She's Italian.
okay, great, great. Nice stuff. Nice stuff there. And I think there's another piece by her or a similar
Yep,
looking
yep.
piece
Those,
here.
yeah, that's those are the cold. These are two characters from Anathema Part One, which is also in the Mistland war with the Mistland universe. I created these two, and as the subtitle Part One indicates, they'll return in a future anthology.
Okay,
But yeah,
cool.
that's the mother Emma, and that's the son Arthur.
Awesome. And so
Yeah.
you mentioned the anthology, and I checked out a little bit of that earlier today. And those are all prose stories that kind of take place within or around the world of Mistland. Do you have like a comic that's going with this, or are these all prose books, or they're going to be like art books? Because you got a lot of really cool supplemental material too. Like what forms are these stories going to take?
Okay, so first thing I should make clear is that not all of the stories are in Mistland itself.
Hmm.
That's why the title is Tales from Mistland and Other Oddities, to kind of make that clear in the title
Yeah.
itself. So in this first anthology that I have out, there are three full-length short stories that are in Mistland. There's
Hmm.
the Titular Sun Tiger, there's Anathema Part 1, and there's The Hound of Ashmire. In addition to that, in the book, I have some flash fiction.
Hmm.
For those in the audience who don't know what flash fiction is, that's generally anything under 1,000 words. You
Okay.
know, yeah. So there's five pieces of flash fiction towards the end, and those are set in the Mistland universe, but they're not in Mistland itself. They're not in the country itself. They're more the U.S. and European side, kind of exploring a little bit of what's going on in those parts of the world.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, that's one thing I
Yeah,
always watching Game of Thrones. They have the place that the whole thing takes place in. It's
yeah,
more or less a continent. It seems like you
yeah,
don't really get a
Westeros.
sense. You get a sense that there are other places out there,
Hmm.
but to me, I always saw that this is kind of akin to the Mediterranean, Europe, and I always wondered like, is there another continent? Is there Asia? Is there
Well, I
Africa?
could tell you a whole lot. I love the books that inspired Game of Thrones. So I could talk your head off all night.
Well, no, it's just one of those things that always captured my imagination. I always found myself
Oh yeah,
wondering
yeah. No,
across the other side of Westeros, is there a bunch of other stuff? So it's cool to
yeah,
see.
no, that's the fun thing about fantasy and maps in particular. There's always
Yeah.
something off the edge of the map. You're like, what's out there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Always wondering, what's over there and what
Hmm.
else is out there. So it's cool to see that you've kind of filled that in or given a place for those things to go
Hmm.
within this world, which is cool
Yeah,
stuff.
I actually thought like particularly where exactly Mistland is located
Oh,
and
where
stuff.
is it?
I found like the perfect location.
Is it a
So
spoiler where it is or
eh, it's not too much of a spoiler. I don't think it'd be too big of a spoiler. I don't think it would be and
okay?
stuff because I've already discussed this syncretism and stuff. So the way I imagine Mistland, it's just south of Greenland.
Just south of Greenland. Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, and the reason I imagine that is because I wanted a place that was kind of like part of the new world,
Yeah.
but it also was like far remote enough that like it could kind of be like isolated from the rest of the world with a couple of
Yeah.
supernatural shenanigans. Like well for us supernatural shenanigans. And one reason I thought of that was okay, it's pretty isolated, so no one's it's an island, so no one's gonna drive there,
Yeah.
you know. And I looked at and because it's pretty far north, so you're not gonna get too many airplanes flying in that space.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I looked up a map of all the shipping in like 2018, and that one little spot there was a place where no ship passes through.
Okay. Makes
So I was like,
sense.
yeah,
So it's kind of a conceivable reason why people would have left it alone to some extent or not bothered with it, where it could have developed a little bit more of a self-contained culture, ecosystem, all that
yeah,
stuff, history, um,
yeah, to a
and
certain
then
degree,
still
and it
kind of has
helps, of course,
avenues where
that
it could
like
branch out.
yeah, and it
That's
helps
cool.
that it's not. It helps that it's not like obviously these maps aren't drawn to scale. Like if it was
Hmm.
drawn to scale, like I imagine the whole thing with all the little islands, with all these smaller islands around it, and the little part that says Free State, that's its own thing.
Hmm.
Yeah, all that stuff together, the whole thing is roughly, I imagine, the size of like Sicily. So it's
Oh,
not, it's
okay.
not, it's not very
Yeah,
big
not that big.
in
Okay.
terms of
Yeah.
land
Wow.
mass. Yeah,
All right. Cool.
yeah,
Very cool stuff. So yeah, I
yeah. But I almost forgot it. Yeah, but to answer your question, so right now I have one anthology out. That's
mhm.
the
Oh
Tales
yeah.
from Mistland and Other Oddities, Volume One. There's
Yeah.
13
Over
short
for that.
stories,
Mhm.
5 pieces of flat fiction. That guy you just passed with the cane.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
No, the guy with the cane. If you go
Oh,
back a
guy
little
with
bit
the
further.
cane. Oh, the older. Oh, this guy. Yeah, I like this
So
drawing a
this
lot.
guy, that's the husband of Emma. That's the husband of Emma, father of Arthur. Those the boy and mother duo
Okay.
that you showed her. Yeah. This isn't much of a spoiler because it's revealed pretty much from the beginning, but he's dead.
Yeah, he had that look of like Batman's parents. You just see the picture of him. And it's like something about it that just tells me this guy is like this is the painting over the fireplace,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
sort of
yeah.
guy.
It's not much. It's it gets revealed early on in the story, but yeah,
Oh,
and
cool.
stuff.
I really
Yeah.
like this drawing. Is this by the same artist who did your other illustrations, or someone different?
Now, at this point, I've hired like maybe over 10 artists. So this one
Okay.
was by a guy in Indonesia named Rehan Amin.
Okay. Wow.
He also did the picture of the hunter, the guy with the stun baton in his hands.
Oh, I saw that. That was interesting. I wanted to go to that because it's
Hmm.
very different than what I kind of you see all these other ones that are a little more
Hmm.
medieval kind of throwback
Yeah,
ones and
so,
this
yeah, so
very science fictiony.
yeah, so this guy is the antagonist of the Sun Tiger story and stuff. As
Okay.
you can guess from his title, The Hunter, he's pursuing the Sun Tiger. and
Okay.
stuff. Yeah, and part of the whole neo-Victorian aesthetic is that it is kind of sci-fi-y. You know what I mean? Again,
Yeah.
with the advanced technology, again the Wakanda parallel and stuff. But there are kind of differences, and there actually is a backstory to the armor's design and stuff. I was gonna reveal it in maybe in a later book, but I'll go ahead and reveal it here because that book I don't know if and when it'll get made. Just because the technical things I'll discuss in a moment. So the Guardians, there's a group that gets mentioned in Anathema Part 1 called the Guardians,
Mm-hmm.
and they were kind of say a cross between the X-Men and the US Avengers in the sense
Okay.
that they were mutants and they protected Mistland, but they only stayed in Mistland. They didn't go outside Mistland. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of clashed with another group of mutants that were more like supremacists and terrorists.
Okay.
But
Wow.
one of the things I wanted to do to make my characters different was, I'll be brutally honest, I wanted to avoid leather, latex, and spandex.
Yeah. Okay.
I wanted something that was more practical, less kind of revealing, both because Mistland's neo-Victorian aesthetic, they'd probably get sued for public indecency.
Mm-hmm.
And also I want something that was a bit more different and practical. So I came up with this idea that they kind of had suits of armor built for them.
Okay.
And these suits of armor had multiple utilities. One, physically it's good protection. Two, it keeps their faces hidden. And then the third, there was a voice modulator so that their enemies can't figure out their identity through their voice.
Mm-hmm.
And it allows for wireless communication. So, you don't have to have Captain America run halfway across New York to tell Iron Man they're sending a nuke. You can just touch his headpiece they're sending a nuke, intercept it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very. I like how well thought out everything is here. You kind of really approach this, and maybe it's a good question. When you were coming up with this, did you start with some characters or a basic plot, a character-driven plot and a conflict that you then built this around, or did you just kind of come up with the idea for this world, let that take shape in your mind, and then kind of came up with characters and conflicts and plots that became a way to populate it? Where'd you start with this?
Mm-hmm. So I would say it started with the characters. I don't remember exactly when it all fell into place, but if I had to guess, the inspiration for Mistland was an older idea I had that never developed.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this idea for a novel set in a fictitious Russian island, and
Okay.
and in that island there was a detective guy who when people were turning into monsters, and he discovers that the main villainess was poisoning the water supply with some experimental substance.
Mm-hmm.
And the final confrontation took place in a room full of glass. When I told my friend later, he was like, "That sounds like James Bond," and I was like, "I never watched James Bond, but okay."
Okay.
But I think the kind of
I just think of which one that is.
I don't know either, but that kind of sci-fi, isolated island place. Maybe that was the kernel.
Okay.
But I remember I first started really shaping it when my mom kind of enrolled me on a whim in a extracurricular writing course at my local community college.
Okay.
And for the final kind of project, you had to write write at least the introduction to at least something, write 1,500 words for
Mm-hmm.
the professor to critique. And so I was like, okay, I have this idea for a story, might as well give it a shot, write it. And that was Anathema Part 1, the opening. Now I'll admit it changed a lot. That story and the backstory and so many things changed over the years as I tinkered and went back and forth on little details.
Mm-hmm.
For example, in the beginning, Harry and Arthur didn't exist. Emma was just a single woman, and she was tracking down a terrorist by the name of Bookworm, who had the power of the perfect memory, but it was tied to eating stuff. He would literally eat books to memorize their contents.
Oh wow, he probably had a lot of stomach issues.
Yeah, probably. And then later on, and then at one point after that, I was thinking about making it a villain origin story, having Arthur die at the end and Emma goes full Joker. But but instead of say like the Harlequin outfit, think more like a bloody wedding dress or something, like a deranged mom.
Mm-hmm.
And then at other, and then there was figuring out, who, what, what's the deal with Theodora? She's a character name dropped in part 1, who becomes important in like later part, important like in a later story.
Mm-hmm.
But there was that, and I figured out who's the main villain in the bigger picture and stuff. And then there was like the royal family in particular. I went back and forth trying to figure out the royal family. Like at
Oh
one
yeah, I
point,
saw there was a picture here of a kind of royal lineage chart.
Yeah. So at one point, yeah. So like at one point, I had Queen Genevieve. Like at one point, she had like a daughter and a granddaughter. But I didn't really like it. Just like something just didn't fit with what I wanted, And when I came up with the idea of the twin princesses, Ultima and Nova, I kind of scraped the old idea immediately because I knew this was the idea I wanted for them.
Oh, okay.
That and I realized a granddaughter wouldn't have fit with the timeline.
Oh yeah. I've struggled. I had an idea for a story where I was just going to take kind of a generation at a time. And I had these two brother and sister twins that were like inherited the royal throne. They had like some kind of powers. I was working out, and I'm kind of like looking at it and thinking how I want to. I don't generally come up with that much of the world beforehand, but I found myself really thinking, I probably need to figure out a few generations of this to make it work, even for the first part. So it's definitely an ambitious, task here you've got, and you've done a lot of the work setting up, backstories and where things are going to go, which is really cool to see. So how much of this do you have planned out for the future?
So in terms of Mistland, for example, I have a history of the world going from like the end of World War II up until like 2030, 2040. In terms of like, I have characters and story arcs, and some I might write, some if I'm lucky enough, I'll find like another person to write. You know what I mean, like a co-author.
Yeah.
I've kind of always wanted Mistland to be like a collaborative effort with me kind of like as the Kevin Feige in the end.
Yeah.
Like managing things from above. So yeah, like I have like arcs and I have characters that fit in those arcs, but I have enough blank spaces where people can just invent their own thing and go wild too.
Yeah, it seems like you do.
And stuff.
Yeah, that's cool stuff. And that's actually something else I was meaning to ask you. You've got a lot of collaborators here in your Tales from Mistland anthology. You've been working with a lot of artists. Can you tell me a little bit about like how you kind of found writers to collaborate with in your world and how you've gone about that? And then maybe just a little bit about how you found the artists who have done some of this great work for you.
Oh yeah, sure. So I'll start with my authors. So like I mentioned, Kyle and Brian, I met them in a creative writing class back in like 2013, 2014, back in community college, way back. Yeah, so we're all really good friends. So when I was thinking about people who could beef out the book, I turned to them immediately and stuff. And they were kind enough to contribute, add a little bit of spice and flavor to, my style. I don't want to like put, I probably shouldn't put myself down, but everyone has their signature, and after tasting it for a while, you want something different.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and you've got, like I said, you've got a really broad world here with a lot of, you could come up with some crazy stuff that would fit in here and not step on the toes of any other plot line, I think. So it's cool that you kind of built that in mind to, leave space for collaborators and kind of, it seems like you kind of planned this pretty early on that you wanted to work with other people. You wanted to leave the story open, which is cool. I don't think I've ever talked to anybody who's done that, but it's a cool idea. I'm sure a lot of people have, but very cool to see. And artists, you've got some really cool artwork here. You mentioned a few people have done this stuff. You've got some character stuff, some covers, some maps. Tell me a little bit about how those get put together.
Okay, yeah. And just to not, ding down anyone, there are two other co-authors of mine, Jim and Felix. So Jim, I've known for a while on Tumblr. I used to follow his Tumblr. I follow his Tumblr blog, Wars of a Song of Ice and Fire, and stuff. And I've read some of his little. Sometimes he would post like little bits of original writing, and I was always impressed by it and his knowledge of things like politics and history and military, which makes sense because he's both an engineer and he's a veteran.
Okay.
Stuff, yeah. So when I was thinking about who else can I turn to that isn't an immediate friend, he was one of my first thoughts because I knew if I could get him to contribute, I'd get like something pretty different from what me and my friends write. I'd get something that's a bit more hard boiled, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And he did. He came through really well. Like his story, Cold. It's as my first editor, Graham Bennett said, it reads like one of those old war stories you might find in old magazines.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool to imagine in this world.
Yeah, well, it's one of the standalones. So that's something
Okay.
I want to emphasize again. Not everything is set in Mistland
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. So like
Okay. Gotcha.
like most of the stories are not in Mistland. Like the stuff that's in Mistland are the 5 flash fictions and the 1st, 7th, and 13th story.
Okay.
Yeah. When I was talking to the editor about how to arrange things, we did that deliberately, having the first, middle, and last proper story be about Mistland to kind of anchor people's memory.
Oh, cool.
But so for example, this guy you have on stream right now, that's Goranis, King of Scotland and stuff.
Oh, okay, cool.
The guy the person who did that is Dracona Arts. They didn't feel comfortable giving me their real name. Totally understandable. But yeah.
It's the internet. All good.
Yeah. Dracona's the one who's been drawing pretty much all of my King Arthur, all of my classic King Arthur material. So that's Gunvasius.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
he's
here,
a minor character.
He's kind of trying to scrub through the artwork that looks like that. I thought there were a few more.
You just passed though. Yeah, the guy you passed though was the Dragon Slayer. He's one of my more prouder. He's one of the stories I'm more proud of.
Okay,
Dragon Slayer. Yeah, mainly because very few people write in second person, and a number of my friends tell me that's their favorite story. So that's why.
Oh, all right.
Very cool. Yeah, I've had one person whose favorite was Sorrow's End. There's a picture of Sorrow's End in somewhere in the gallery. I think it's the guy holding a book. Yeah, right there.
Oh, here he is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the main character of Sorrow's End. Caius Tyrell, not related to the Game of Thrones dynasty and stuff, but they are derived from the same source. Me and Martin are thinking of this from the same source.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you've got a lot of different artists here doing some really cool stuff. I really like this piece.
That's the Titular Dragon Slayer. And if it means anything, there's more Dragon Slayer content in the next book I'm working on right now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
No, I like this armor. I like the design of this. I like how kind of it works as a flat. The way the colors intersperse there. It's got a cool design to it that is kind of, I'm sure it could work in 3 dimensions pretty well, but it's nice to see this flatter, almost like a stained glass window type of a look. Makes it look very epic, cool, gives you a lot of the history just by the way it's drawn. So cool stuff there.
Yeah, I'll admit, like my personal favorite as a writer in the book, I would say my personal favorite is probably the story Girl in Blue.
Okay.
For me, just like one, I feel it's kind of like the most romantic and lyrical, particularly the lyrical bit, but also it's also the one I remember very vividly, like the process of writing it. Like I remember the music I was listening to really get into the psychology of the character and their emotions. Stuff. In particular, I remember listening to it's this French shoegaze metal band called Alceste.
Oh, okay.
And
I was going to ask what kind of music, and that is an answer.
And then I didn't listen to this song while writing it, but the song really encapsulates the story in a nutshell. In a sense, if you look, there's Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Vaguely, I think I saw part of that movie.
Okay, yeah. So someone made a fan song for that character with made up lyrics. And that fan song is like perfect for like the main character in Girl in Blue. Yeah.
Well, speaking of music, you have let me minimize this. You've commissioned some music you mentioned for your characters. I'll play a quick section of that if it's all right.
Go ahead.
And then maybe you can tell me kind of what drove you. Did you get that and what the process was there? Because I don't know if I've talked to people who, and I've commissioned voice actors. You've obviously been commissioning artists. But I don't think I've talked to anybody who's making music. So let's play a little bit of this, and you can tell me something about it.
It may not have started.
Oh, are you not hearing it?
I'm not hearing anything.
Oh,
Listen,
okay. I'm hearing it. Let's see here. Surprised if no, that's probably it. Either it hasn't played and it's been boring, or it has worked and that's probably enough of it. But so it's a theme of this character, I guess. Obviously,
Yeah.
what made you want to get a piece of music for this, and how did that go? What was the process there?
Okay, so this is Eugenius, the 46th King of Scotland.
Okay.
So Eugenius was a character that was made initially by Felix, my fifth co-author. So Felix was a follower of mine on Tumblr for a long time, and we got to kind of like talking privately through the DMs, and he showed me this story that he wrote about Eugenius's ascension to the throne of Scotland in the time of King Arthur. And I knew when I read it immediately, I could see like the diamond in the rough, to quote Jafar al-Haddad. You know, so I asked him if he'd be willing to kind of collaborate with me and like allow me to kind of maybe rewrite the story, kind of like tighten it up, make it a bit fancier, you know, and kind of include it in the book. He had no problems with that. And so once everything else in the book was finished, I kind of took his rough draft, which is on my Tumblr. If you want to like see his rough draft and then compare that to the final version after I went through it, you can like read the two side by side.
Oh, awesome! Awesome.
But yeah, so like I went through the whole thing section by section. I kind of like rewrote things, you know, line by line, paragraph by paragraph, and I would send it to him for commentary and approval. And then as we did that, he told me about his plans for other stories, like Eugenius's reign, what happens after he dies, and all that stuff, and how that fits in with King Arthur and Camelot and stuff. You know, it was kind of like this big epic tapestry, like the MCU or Game of Thrones, you know. And I kind of realized I want to be part of this. I want to be in a Ground Zero. And so
that's awesome. I'm a big King Arthur fan, so very cool.
Oh man, you're gonna love the next book then. Like at least I think like half of it is King Arthur stuff.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I was a huge fan growing up of the 1981 movie Excalibur. Just loved that thing, and always messed around with the idea of doing a King Arthur story that was like just really influenced by the look of that film, and I've never quite put it together. But it's cool to see that that's kind of tying into Mistland. How does King Arthur relate to everybody in this? Is there something that ties him to Mistland, or is it just kind of part of the history of the world and some people pick up on it?
So I'm gonna say two things. One, there is a version of King Arthur in the Mistland universe.
Okay.
But Felix is retelling it its own thing. It's completely divorced.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, there's two separate settings.
All right.
But
cool.
I have like 4 or 5 different versions of King Arthur. One is in the Mistland universe, and the others are various retellings of the same story, but in different ways, you know? So this one I'm doing with Felix is one way, but it's most comprehensive because we have a lot of stories planned. We even have like one novel planned, like 10 years from now.
Great. Awesome.
You know, like with life, med school, and other things. That's why like I planned out what I want to write in advance, you know? Just because with med school, you know, you never know how life's going to shape up.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, so Eugenius is like a major character in a lot of the stories. He's either a major character or he makes at least a cameo in a lot of the stories we have planned. And since he was the first character we developed together and talked about, he was the one I kind of like I wanted both something to special for him, but also he was the one I had the clearest idea of what a theme song would be.
Yeah.
And stuff. So
cool.
And so when I said, okay, when I thought, okay, I have some extra cash, I want to hire a theme song, you know, so Eugenius is the guy. So I reached out to some people on YouTube. I've listened to their music or whatever, and they mention either in their comments or in their profile that they take commissions. I reached out to a couple of them, and there was one that was within my means. And this was a piano solo. Like he said, like, you know, the budget, like my budget was only enough for like a piano solo, but that was acceptable. Okay. And so I looked for like little piano pieces that were suitable, like as references. I sent them to him, to the musician. His name is Sam Young. He's British, I believe. And, you know, and then I gave him a description of what I wanted to sound like. If I remember correctly, I told him I want the beginning to kind of sound kind of like a little bit innocent with a hint of sadness, but then as the song goes on, it gets like the pace goes from being slow and methodical to like fast and kind of angry sounding.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah. And what I really like about the song, the end result is he kind of took that idea, but he kind of expanded on it. I don't know how much consciously, but the way he expanded on it, the song in a way really kind of mirrors Eugenius's whole life, from his childhood to his deathbed. And I really like how it kind of like mirrors the words in that regard. Obviously, I know the character more than the reader.
Yeah, sure.
So I can see the connection. But hopefully when however many years it takes us to write his whole life story, readers can see the connection too when all is said and done.
Awesome. Well, yeah, this sounds cool. So just to wrap up, where can people find if you have a campaign going? Do you just have a website where people can kind of keep up to date on stuff with Mistland and your work? Where can people check out more of this?
Okay, so my first book, Tales from Mistland and Other Oddities, Volume 1, it's on Amazon. Unfortunately, I'm going to be brutally honest, I just don't have the money to buy my own ISBN, so I'm stuck on Amazon for right now.
Okay.
That being said, I'm active on Tumblr. Like that's where I post all the artwork. I do have a YouTube channel that's where the music is, and I do have an author email that I check. I try to check every day. So if you ever want to reach out, Tumblr, Facebook, YouTube, I'm on Goodreads. If you ever just want to ask me a question or just say something nice or something mean, I got to develop a thick skin. All good
to have when you're an author. Well, dude, thanks for coming on to talk about this and show off all this cool stuff. It's really an awesome world, and it's gonna be cool to see more of it take shape. It's cool to see also there's prose books, there's music. This is just you're just kind of filling in this world with a lot of cool content and some great collaboration. So very cool to see, and I'm glad we were able to check it out.
Thanks. It's been an honor being here, and I'm happy to finally actually get to see your face and hear your voice.
Yeah. Here's what I look and sound like, I guess.
Yeah, better than me, I'll say.
Well, yeah. So thanks for watching, everybody who's watching here and leaving comments. I'm sorry we couldn't hear that on stream. I'm not quite sure why that music wouldn't share, but I'm gonna re-edit some parts of this to put up in the next few days. To just we'll have the links in there of all the stuff you mentioned where people can check it out, and I guess that'll do it. So everybody have a good one, and Dennis, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
All right.